After buying him a barbershop, my boyfriend tattooed his new girl's name on his neck using my credit card and smirked. It's called upgrading. She posted selfies in my car wearing my shirt, bragging, "Thanks for the sponsorship." He told me, "You'll never be her," as he blocked me and emptied our business account, so I hacked his system and exposed everything on video. I watched him press the needle into her neck like it was a payment terminal and not my credit card. He grinned the whole time, like he knew he was showing me something I couldn't stop. The video was shaky. One hand holding the camera, the other steadying her jaw, and in the background I could hear the playlist from the shop, the same shitty playlist I'd cursed at for weeks because he refused to change it. He leaned back, winked at the camera, and mouthed, "It's called upgrading." Then he put the card back in his wallet. My card, my name on the chip, my bank number saved in the tab he always said he forgot. I sat in the driver's seat of my own car, parked outside the barbershop I'd bought him last year, and watched the whole thing twice. 3 times. Fourth time when the message from her exploded across my phone. "Thanks for the sponsorship," followed by a selfie, my car in the background, my favorite flannel tied around her waist, and his smirk catching the camera like it was his prize. He'd literally used the business account to pay for her tattoo and filmed it to rub it in. He called me on speaker so I couldn't block the number fast enough. He laughed, soft and flat. "You'll never be her," he said. Then he locked his phone and muted me like I was background noise. He did it slow enough that I heard the click. Then the app I used to run payroll spun and spat an error. Account empty. Every penny we'd poured into rent, clippers, the crappy espresso machine, gone. He'd hit a button, transferred the funds out, and cut me off. I could see the receipts in my email, the confirmations he'd left sitting like fingerprints. Wire to an account in someone else's name, purchases labeled promotional partnership. He'd even bought plane tickets for her under the business travel column. I remember the moment before all of this, the way he cried when I signed the lease, the way he practiced his thank you speech when customers complimented the new chairs. I remember writing the first check, the thrill of seeing our name on the permit. I remember sleeping on the couch during renovations because he needed my good energy, and him kissing my knuckles the morning we cut the ribbon. That memory made the video in my pocket feel like a different life, filmed on someone else's camera. There's this stupid practical part of me that cataloged everything in the 10 seconds after he hung up. The serial number of the point of sale he bragged about setting up, the admin password I'd never changed because I trusted him, the router in the back that still used the default password because he liked easy. Anger burned hot and mechanical, not the dramatic chest-clutching kind, but the cold, exact kind that says, "Okay, this can be undone." I thought about calling his mother, about marching into the shop, slamming the video onto the counter, but the way he'd smirked told me he'd expected a scene. He wanted a scene. So I did what I shouldn't have admitted to anyone then or now. I stayed in my car, opened the laptop he'd bought me for business stuff, and I started digging. Not with a dramatic Hollywood montage, I'm not going to tell you how, but I found what I needed, piece by piece. The receipts, the transfers, the backups he thought he'd deleted. And then, because I am a goddamn idiot, and also because I'd reached the point where the idea of living my life under his laughter was unbearable, I made a video. It wasn't a confession. It was a file drawer snapshot of everything he'd done. Timestamps, transfers, the tattoo video, her selfies in my shirt, screenshots of his messages where he called me old money and out of season. I edited it with hands that trembled and fingers that remembered every time I'd signed his name on a lease application. At 2:13 a.m., in a Dunkin' lot with the shop's neon blinking over my head, I hit export. My screen blurred with the tears I refused to let fall. I hit upload, and before the progress bar could reach 10%, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. "Stop. You have no idea what you're about to release." The ringtone sounded like a final warning, and then someone knocked on my window. Before he became the guy with another woman's name tattooed on his neck using my money, he was the man who convinced me I could build something with him. His name's Devin, and when I met him, he was cutting hair in his cousin's kitchen, charging $20 a head and taking tips in cash because he didn't have a bank account. I was the one who did, the one with the stable job, a decent credit score, and a soft spot for people who said they just needed a chance. We met in Charlotte, at a block party one summer night 2 years ago. He was cutting hair right on the porch for free, Promotion, he called it. I remember how confident he looked, that quiet kind of charm that made you think he'd always have your back. I was in marketing at the time, bored out of my mind and tired of dating tech bros who only talked about stocks. Devin was different. He looked at me like I was sunlight. Said I had business energy. He told me he had dreams, not pipe dreams, he said, but plans. He wanted his own shop, a place where people could walk in and feel like family. I still remember those words. Like family. That's what sold me. I'd grown up without much of one, so the idea of building something that felt like belonging hit me straight in the chest. At first, everything was good. He hustled. He'd cut hair until midnight, talk about branding, ask my opinion on logo ideas. I helped him make a business plan, filled out loan applications he was too anxious to touch. We were this little team, him the artist, me the planner. He'd tell people, we're building something big. It wasn't my business or his, it was ours. But that's the thing, when you're in love, you don't notice when ours slowly becomes mine and yours. When he started saying my shop, I thought it was just how people talk. When he asked me to put the lease in my name, just until his credit clears, I didn't blink. I figured we were in this together. I co-signed the equipment loans, paid the deposit on the storefront, bought the fancy chairs he swore would make people respect the space. And when he didn't have enough for tools, I handed him my card and said, just use it and keep the receipts. The first time he called me his investor, I laughed, thinking it was a cute joke. Looking back, I realize it wasn't. The first red flag came wrapped in a smile when I walked into the shop one morning and found a girl sitting in the chair, legs crossed, sipping coffee from my mug. She introduced herself as Lana, said she was helping Devin with the books. I asked Devin later who she was, and he said she was just a friend from before. I didn't push it. I wanted to believe we were solid. Then the late nights started. Inventory checks, customer outreach, networking events. I'd stay home waiting, scrolling through business emails, watching his last scene on WhatsApp jump from midnight to 2 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. There was one night I'll never forget. He came home reeking of perfume, not the kind I wore, and told me I was too paranoid when I asked. He kissed my forehead and said, "Don't start acting like you don't trust me now. You're my backbone." The next morning, my card was declined at Target. When I checked my banking app, there was a $1,200 charge from a tattoo studio. His name on the receipt. That was the day something inside me snapped, but I didn't know how deep the rot went yet. Because what I'd find next, in one of his client folders, hidden under an invoice file, would make me realize that the girl in my mug wasn't just his friend. She was the reason he'd built the shop in the first place. And the real betrayal hadn't even started yet. After I found out about Lana, I tried to tell myself it was a mistake, a harmless flirtation. But every accidental encounter made me more paranoid. Her car parked outside the shop, random Instagram posts with Devin tagged, and the little things he'd start hiding, phone locked, emails deleted, client notes he swore were private. My gut screamed, but I couldn't convince myself he'd actually betray everything we built. Not him. Not the guy who kissed my knuckles when we opened the doors. Then came the business accounts. Devin had access to everything because it was under my name. Payroll, rent, deposits, even some personal savings I'd set aside for emergencies. At first, I noticed minor withdrawals, nothing huge, and he brushed it off as operational expenses. But the numbers started adding up. Funds vanished with no explanation. Checks bounced. Vendors called. My heart would sink every time I saw declined on my own card. By the third month, the evidence stacked so high I couldn't ignore it. He wasn't just dipping into our accounts. He was siphoning money to Lana, charging her expenses on my card, and covering it up with fake invoices and vendor payments. The shop was a mask. Behind it, he was funding her lifestyle on my credit, on my trust. And the worst part? He did it while keeping up the charade of romance. He'd kiss me on the cheek in the morning, whisper, "You're my everything," then disappear for hours, returning with perfume on his shirt and a smug look that told me he knew I was onto him. I hated that smugness. I hated it so much that I started keeping a ledger, every dollar, every text, every suspicious screenshot. I was building a case silently, quietly, because I had no intention of letting him see it coming. It reached its peak the night he tattooed her name on his neck. I knew he'd spent the day using my credit card. The charges in my banking app were precise, calculated. It was deliberate humiliation, not a mistake. And then the selfies started showing up. Her wearing my clothes, lounging in my car, grinning like she owned everything. That's when he called me, and that's when he said it. "You'll never be her." I remember the words echoing in my head. It wasn't just about the tattoo, not just the car or my clothes. He was declaring war. A cold, deliberate, psychological attack. And somehow, worse than losing money or seeing her face in my stuff, it stung because he made me feel small. Invisible, replaceable. But there's a part of me that should have backed down then, should have let him have his fun. I should have called the police or told my family. Instead, something darker took hold. I realized that if I walked away, he'd win completely. He'd prove he could destroy me with a smirk. So I didn't walk away. I started planning. Not with guns or confrontation, I'm not stupid, but in a way he'd never see coming. I spent nights cross-referencing bank statements with his laptop logins, mapping patterns in his transactions, and saving every incriminating message. I learned the exact moment he checked balances, the folder he hid her expenses in, the cloud backup he forgot to lock. And in that process, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Devin wasn't just funding her lifestyle. He was documenting ours, everything we'd built together, in a way that made me realize he had a second playbook. And it wasn't just about money. It was about total control. By the time he blocked me and emptied the accounts, I was ready. But I had no idea what I would find once I started digging into the files he thought I'd never touch. Because the deeper I went, the more I realized how completely I'd been used. I shouldn't have been surprised when I found it. But I was. Hidden in a folder labeled projects, buried under invoices and appointment logs, were hundreds of documents, not just bank statements, not just receipts, but spreadsheets detailing me. My spending habits, my schedule, notes about how I reacted to him asking for favors, screenshots of conversations with my family and friends. He had a file called Emotional Weaknesses and another called Breaking Points. At first, I laughed nervously. This had to be some insane exaggeration. But then I opened a subfolder, videos, hundreds of them, time-stamped over months. Me at home, at work, in the car, unknowingly recorded while he did shop tour or business updates. Every time I'd thought he was taking a photo or filming a TikTok for the shop, he was collecting material. Watching, cataloging, learning how to push my buttons. And then I saw the earliest file, dated before he ever even proposed building the shop together. It was me, laughing at a coffee shop, talking about my savings, my trust in him, the things I wanted out of life. His voice whispered over the footage, notes, calculations, commentary. He was studying me like I was a case study, a target. He didn't love me. He had been planning how to use me from the very start. It hit me like a gut punch. Every favor I did, every time I covered for him, every late-night check I wrote, it wasn't love he was returning. It was preparation. Preparation to strip me of everything, down to my dignity, to make the tattoo, the car selfies, the social media posts feel like a celebration of his victory. I felt sick but furious. The betrayal wasn't just Lana, wasn't just the money. It was the years of my trust weaponized against me. And he had the audacity to smirk while doing it. He didn't just cheat me financially. He cheated me emotionally, strategically, with a precision that was almost surgical. And here's the part that broke me and scared me in equal measure. Buried in the last folder was a subfolder named Next Steps. It was a timeline, planned out to the week, showing exactly when he'd move accounts, when he'd bring Lana in, when he'd send those selfies. He had anticipated me discovering everything, even calculated how I might react. It was all so deliberate, so cold. And yet, the file contained something he hadn't counted on. Something he left open, thinking I'd never touch it. Access credentials to the shop's internal systems, cloud backups, email accounts, everything. It was as if he wanted to leave a challenge. I stared at the screen, hands trembling, mind racing. He thought he'd won. But he hadn't realized I could see the entire playbook. Every lie, every manipulation, every dirty move was documented. And now, I had the keys. I leaned back, heart pounding, staring at his smug face in the tattoo video. And that's when the first thought that wasn't pure panic hit me. I could make him pay. And not just with words, not just with exposure. I could dismantle everything he thought he had, piece by piece. It was the kind of revenge that didn't just hurt him, it humiliated him. But I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move and he'd disappear or worse, destroy whatever evidence I had, so I started mapping it all out. Step 1, make him think he was untouchable. Step 2, use his own system against him. Step 3, well, that's when the real fun began. When I closed the folder labeled Next Steps, my hands were shaking but my mind felt calm, like it had been snapped into focus. Anger turned into geometry. There was a shape to what I wanted, not just to hurt him, but to make everyone see what he'd built on my life and call it what it was. Theft, manipulation, performance art where I was the prop. I wanted him exposed in a way that couldn't be gaslit away with his smooth voice and a dozen staged smiles. The keys he'd left open were everything I needed. Admin access to the shop's email, the cloud backups, the little CRM he used to store client info, and the one drive where he hoarded those videos of me. I didn't hack in the cinematic sense. There weren't lines of code flying by. I walked through doors he'd left unlocked. He'd been sloppy because he was arrogant. He thought he was smarter than me. He forgot that arrogance makes mistakes look like invitations. First thing I did was copy. Not delete. Not change. Copy. I mirrored the folders onto an external drive I kept in my car, the same shitty sedan where Lana took selfies in my flannel. Every video, every spreadsheet, every annotated screenshot went into neat folders labeled in the same blunt language he used. Receipts, promos, emotional weaknesses. I wanted to be organized for once. I wanted to be undeniable. While I was copying, I made a file that would be the nucleus of everything, a video that stitched the evidence together. I didn't narrate much. I let his own voice, his own smirks, his own little cruelty do the talking. I spliced the clip of him saying, "It's called upgrading," with the bank confirmations, with her selfies in my clothes, with the promotional partnership, invoices that paid for plane tickets and hotel rooms charged against our payroll. I timed it so the smug little moments landed like punches. 30 seconds of smirk, 10 seconds of receipt, 30 of apology he never gave, looped and undeniable. I also planned where to drop it. There were 100 ways to be vindictive, but I wanted this to sting in a public, precise way. Not because I enjoyed spectacle, I hated that part, but because Devin built his reputation in public. He courted clients, therapists, vendors, and friends by showing them curated versions of his life. I would take that curated life and strip it down into raw footage and receipts. My target list was simple. The Barbershop's client email list, the vendors who'd financed equipment, the landlord, his family, and the one person I most wanted to reach, Lana. If she was complicit or merely convenient, I wanted her to see the whole thing at once. I scheduled everything like a campaign, not because I was methodical by nature, but because chaos favors the prepared. I set up anonymous accounts tied to throwaway emails, uploaded the video to multiple places, and made sure copies existed outside his control. I left a breadcrumb trail that would make it easy for journalists or curious clients to verify. Pictures of receipts, redacted bank numbers, dates, timestamps. I was careful not to include anything that would slander beyond what I could prove. I wanted truth to be the stick. At night, when Charlotte's lights blurred into a single low glow, I would sit in my car with the laptop open and stare at the list of names I planned to notify. Every send was a small exhale. Every confirmation pinged like a step toward something I hadn't allowed myself to imagine until then. Freedom. Not the kind where he got away with being cruel, and I melted into secrecy. Freedom where people knew exactly who he was. And still, even as I clicked prepare to send, a cold thought gnawed at me. He had been planning too. He'd left the access almost like a dare, like he wanted me to play a game where he'd set the rules. That arrogance made me smile in the wrong way, because if he'd set rules, I could break them. I set the final piece in motion, a scheduled release that would go live on a Thursday, when the shop got its heaviest traffic online. I hit save, closed the laptop, and listened to the hum of the neon sign across the street. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. "You think you can ruin me?" I pictured the smirk, the needle, the name on his neck. I typed back nothing. I didn't need to. I already had a plan. I thought I knew the game. I had the receipts, the videos, the timeline. I thought the final move was a press release and a string of emails that would watch his tidy life unravel in front of his clients and the vendors who trusted him. I thought the twist would be the public humiliation, the immediate unraveling. Then Lana knocked on my car window. She looked like the pictures, careless hair, my flannel tied around her waist. But there was panic in the way she kept her hands in her coat, like she was hiding something fragile. I almost slammed the laptop shut out of reflex. Instead, she slid into the passenger seat without waiting to be invited, eyes darting to the external drive on my lap. "Don't," she said. "Not yet." Everything in me bristled. We were enemies. She was the face in my car, the girl laughing in my clothes. But the thing about people who conspire is they don't always agree forever. There are fractures. Motives change. She put a small, battered USB drive on my dashboard and said, "You've been looking at the wrong files." She spoke like a woman who'd rehearsed this. She told me she'd been with Devin longer than I thought. Said she moved into the shop to help. And that part of that help had been running a side of things Devin didn't put on invoices. Favors, trips, bribes to keep some of his worst clients quiet. She claimed she'd taken the role of accomplice to protect herself in a life that didn't leave women many options. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, flat, "Why are you here?" She blinked, and then the whole story came out in a single, messy confession. She hadn't been a puppet. She'd been both puppet and cutter. Devin used her to close deals, then used the money to buy her loyalty. But loyalty has a cost, and it had been paid in small humiliations she'd tolerated because she thought he loved her until he didn't. The tattoo, a show, the smug text, a guarantee that I'd retaliate and that he'd look untouchable doing it. Then she said what I didn't see coming. She hated him. Not in a young, jealous way, but in a burned-out, terrified-for-her-future way. She'd kept a second set of everything. Raw footage, unredacted bank transfers, his personal notes where he'd named shell accounts, and a lawyer he used to launder funds. She'd been their accountant in a way. She'd known the strings. She slid a folder over with images of transfers to accounts I'd never heard of. Names of men who were not just vendors, but middlemen for laundering. She told me she'd planned to run weeks ago. She'd lied to him about a new sponsorship and booked a ticket. But before she left, she made a copy, not to save herself, but because she'd seen how he toyed with people and realized the line he walked would eventually break someone irreparably. She couldn't live with that on her conscience. She wanted out and she wanted him stopped. Then the part that punched the air from my lungs, she was pregnant. Not a manipulative power move, she said it like she was cleaning a wound in front of me. "It's mine," she said. "Not his." She told me that part of her plan had been to secure funds to run, and she'd let him bankroll pieces of it, but she hadn't meant for it to get this wide, for him to escalate into total theft. She'd stayed because she didn't know how else to get away with a baby on the way. I sat there, and the moral bleeds set in like ice. She'd been the other woman, yes. She'd been an accessory to humiliation. But she was also a terrified person who'd secretly hated what she helped make. And she'd given me more than a confession. She'd given me keys. Full access to the encrypted backups she'd taken, the ones Devin thought only he had. She'd transferred them to the battered USB. I could have pushed her out of my car and uploaded everything immediately. I could have let her walk back into Devin's life and burn. Instead, I listened as she told me the last unforeseen twist. Devin had been planning a last move, a wire that would vanish the business funds and make him disappear without a trace. He'd set the clock for the morning after my release. He'd counted on me lashing out too quickly and making rookie mistakes. We had one night. One real, terrifying, fragile night to decide whether to blow the whole thing wide open or to use what she'd given me to make him crumble in a more permanent way. She wanted testimony protection. I wanted my life back. So we made a new plan in the parking lot. Not a loud, immediate release. A precise, surgical strike that used her backups to tie him to laundering, to show the trajectory of his transfers, and to give evidence to people who couldn't be gaslit. Banks, an honest journalist, and, if necessary, law enforcement. It wasn't vengeance for the sake of spectacle anymore. It was a calculation to ensure he couldn't walk away. Before she left, Lana touched the flannel at her waist and said quietly, "I'm sorry. It wasn't for me, it was for the baby. For the mess she'd been part of. For the way she'd used me as a sponsor in a life she now wanted to escape." The second twist wasn't that she helped me. The twist was that the person I'd been taught to hate was now the only one who could make my revenge clean and irreversible. I used to tell myself there was some messy, human reason, jealousy, lust, a stupid midlife panic. I wanted a motive I could stomach, something that made him human enough that I could forgive eventually. What I found was worse. Devin didn't do any of it because he fell in love or because he was weak. He did it because he had a business model for people. That sounds insane until you see his notes. In a folder labeled scaling, he didn't list suppliers or marketing funnels. He listed people, metrics, expected ROI, investment in human capital, he called it, and then broke down my emotional labor into projected cash flows over 3 years. Lana was a line item: aesthetics, follower potential, ability to convert local influencer reach into foot traffic. Me, seed capital, long game, 60% operational, 40% salvageable as optics. He literally had a spreadsheet forecasting my breakdown and the profit margin if he replaced me with someone younger, flashier, more brand-aligned. He learned to monetize trust. He'd spent months cultivating my credentials, my credit score, my stable job, my patience, and then wrote them off as startup costs. The shop was never about community, it was a vehicle. The ribbon cutting, the thank you speech, the way he kissed my knuckles, all marketing. He'd trained me to be the stable founder so he could play the charming entrepreneur. The videos of me weren't trophies to him, they were user testing. He recorded how I responded when he crossed certain lines, the exact phrasing that would make me apologize, the moment I'd double down on forgiveness. That emotional weaknesses file wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was surveillance to optimize manipulation. He wanted to know the leverage points, then he planned to deploy them when they gave him the highest return with the lowest risk. And the tattoo? That was pure brand calculus. Lana's name on his neck wasn't romance, it was a billboard. He knew one viral clip of the upgrade would earn them months of local hype, and the stunt would be a tax write-off under promotional partnership. Paying for it with my card was the final accounting trick. I funded his rebrand. When he smirked and mouthed, "It's called upgrading," he wasn't taunting me for infidelity. He was closing a deal in front of an audience that mattered. Whoever watched and thought, "That's bold." He wanted his audacity to be his headline. When I confronted him, I'd been looking for a human apology. I expected anger, tears, a messy confession. Instead, he gave me a market analysis. He showed me charts, customer retention rates tied to image refresh, projections that assumed a 20% increase in walk-ins if he rebranded around a high-visibility muse. He wasn't just heartless, he'd turned cruelty into a KPI. And the coldest part, the part that left me recoiling, was how strategic he was about the fallout. Every humiliation had two functions: to create spectacle and to distract. While clients argued on Facebook about who was in the wrong, he funneled the real money into accounts under shell names, cleaned through men I later found in the backups. The plan was to be forgiven by the crowd because the crowd loves a comeback story. He banked on my silence because quiet would let him rebuild without scrutiny. If I exploded, he'd play victim. If I stayed meek, he'd siphon more. Either way, he profited. There's no melodramatic motive here, no lament about lost love. Devin's betrayal was industrial grade because he'd industrialized people. He didn't need to hate me. He needed me to be useful, and when I'd outlived my usefulness, he upgraded like you'd upgrade a phone. That's the thing that chills me. He never saw me as a person, just as capital to be spent and replaced. Knowing that stripped me of every sentimental memory. The knuckle kiss, the ribbon cutting, even the late-night laughs, they were line items. I'd been an asset on his balance sheet. And when I thought about the way he smiled at the camera while pressing the needle in, I understood the worst truth. He enjoyed the efficiency of it. He didn't savor the betrayal. He admired how cleanly it paid off. There's a kind of dread you don't get from ordinary cheating. This one felt like discovering you'd been part of someone's business plan all along and realizing you weren't the only product. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car, the laptop open, Lana's USB drive plugged in, and watched the pieces come together. Every file he'd underestimated, every loophole he'd left, every timestamp of his smug little upgrade was now in my hands. I felt the anger, the grief, the disbelief, all coalescing into a cold, precise drive. Morning came, gray and damp over Charlotte. I logged into the shop's email, the cloud backup, and the client list. I sent the video and documentation in a carefully timed wave. Vendors first, then the landlord, then the clients, and finally a secure tip to a local journalist who had a reputation for exposing scams. Each email included receipts, screenshots, and timestamps, every claim verifiable, undeniable. I didn't embellish, didn't narrate. Devon's own words did the work. By noon, the first calls started coming in. Vendors who'd once trusted him were furious. Clients were reposting the video. Friends and neighbors in Charlotte texted me in disbelief. The barbershop's social media blew up, every like and share a small hammer striking at his reputation. I watched his smirk collapse through screenshots people tagged me in. The second twist came like a punch. Devon tried to log into the accounts. Passwords had been changed, emails forwarded, all traces rerouted. He realized too late that the accomplice he'd underestimated, Lana, had given me everything he thought only he had. He panicked, tried to call, text, threaten, but nothing worked. Every avenue was blocked. And then the icing. I released an anonymized copy of his Next Steps folder to the journalist. It wasn't just humiliation, it was legal evidence. Devon had turned life into spreadsheets and calculations, but the law sees spreadsheets as evidence. He couldn't undo it. He couldn't argue it away. Weeks later, the barbershop closed. Devon tried to restart under a new name in another city, but word traveled fast. Banks refused him. Clients followed me on social media, some to support, some just to watch him flounder. Every move he made was now under public scrutiny. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The satisfaction was in the precision. I had taken the system he built to humiliate me and used it to make him unravel, legally, publicly, and irreversibly. My money was still gone, but the years of betrayal, the humiliation, and the manipulation were now his burden, and everyone who mattered could see it. And Lana, she left Charlotte quietly, carrying her child, finally free from Devon's influence. We never became friends, but we understood each other. The enemy had become the ally of justice. As for me, I kept my car, my flannel, and my pride. I rebuilt my savings and eventually opened a small consulting business, focusing on helping women spot financial manipulation. Sometimes, when I pass by the shuttered barbershop, I smile quietly. Because in the end, he upgraded, but I leveled the entire game. And the kicker? He's probably out there somewhere, still smirking at someone else's money, completely unaware that the blueprint for his downfall came from the one person he thought he could use and replace. I was never just an investor. I was the architect of his ruin.